Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Strategoy video. We're on week 3 of the faction focuses now, and we've got Jonas here with me. It's not just going to be a Ryan monologue. Jonas, how are you doing? Are you excited about what we've seen thus far? Are you excited about what we're going to be talking about today, which will be Fyreslayers? Where are you sitting with third edition, our fourth edition announcements thus far?
Very excited. I'm kind of waiting for just one of my armies, apart from Lumineth, to appear because I kind of have quite a lot of them. Not compared to you, but I still have 4 or 5, and there's been none except for Lumineth. Although obviously that's the most important one to me. I'm weirdly excited for Slayers, and they're my least favorite army aesthetically in AOS because all their models look the same to me. And that's not to say that dwarves are all the same, but if they're all red bearded and all wear no clothes, and the little only difference is that their axes, you're kind of losing me here. But I love their rules. It's so cool. It's cinematic. It's clear. I can't wait to talk about it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I guess your armies, you've kind of gotten to see Lumineth thus far, but then we've got Sylvanus, Seraphon, and Soulblight, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, those will all be fun to do. And yeah, I'm really curious about especially Soulblight, because what we've been seeing with the kind of like minimalization of the armies, Soulblight I think has the risk of taking what Cities has received, where it's going to get
Maybe.
oversimplified. But I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get
All
get into it. Battle
right. Yeah. Let's
trades.
do it. Okay, so you've read through all these, right?
Yep.
Do you want to kind of walk us through your impressions?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. They've kind of simplified it to you're just gonna use the Gold rune. That's the only thing you're gonna get. It's an ability. You have five of them, and you get to use one each battle round. Basically, you don't have to use it each battle round. Obviously, there's nowhere that it says you have to, but you would kind of waste it if you didn't. As you can see, they're all once per battle, so you pop them for an entire battle round usually. And you get the benefit that's on that Gold rune specifically. The first one is pretty well. They're all pretty interesting actually. Is there anything you want to add here, Ryan, about what they missed before we get into the Gold runes?
Sure. I mean, let's just compare it with what it used to be. So it used to be at the start of your hero phase, and then it lasted until your following hero phase.
Yeah.
And now, when it's initiated, depends on the phase. Two of them have to be in your version of that phase. That would be the shooting and charge versions, but the other 3 can happen in your opponent's.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a certain sense, whereas they used to be, let's say you went first in the battle round before, then obviously you had it for the whole battle round, and then if your opponent took a double, you kept having it.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to wait for your hero phase. Well, now it's bound to the battle round itself. So if you don't start it until your part of the thing, let's say you did it in your shooting phase for the shooting phase one at the back end of the turn, well, that's okay because that's a one-off ability.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
like some of the other ones do last. Like let's say the ward one we'll see, which is
if you only pop it in halfway the battle after the halfway point of the battle round, Jesus, you're kind of missing out, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, because now it's just literally cuts off at the end of the battle round. And then it doesn't, the weird thing about it is, unlike some of the other abilities we've seen, like the Facets of War for the Lumineth, correct me if I'm wrong, but regardless of which turn you're taking, you get it for the whole battle round, and you decide before the battle round gets going, right?
Yeah, and you can repeat them. That's also an important distinction.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and these like the timing is weird on them. So I think there's a little bit of a counterintuitive feel from what we've usually done, like with the city's orders that also used to be at the beginning of the battle round. These are just different. So I think the timing is going to be important on these guys.
Mm-hmm. That being said, it's only 5 abilities, and I think you'll get the hang of it quite easily. I really like the elegance of this system, where it's so clear that what you want to do with it each time, right? And it's also quite obvious in what kind of, well, not for all of them, I guess, but for most of them, it's obvious when you want to pop them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go through them in phase order. Yeah. So that'd be the upper side there, left, right, and then we kind of work our way left, right as we go down.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start off with the Rune of Fury. So the effect is always the same. So I'm not gonna read it every time, but I'll read the first time. So you can only use this ability if you have not used an Urgold rune ability this battle round. So as we mentioned, it's only once per battle round. For the rest of the battle round, friendly Fyreslayer units have strike first. When I just read this, I was like, holy shit. But then comes the caveat. While they are in combat with an enemy unit that has charged in the same turn. So you'll likely pop this when you expect your opponent to hit you first. But then you're like, aha, you activated my trap card. I hit you first. Although I guess it's not really a trap card move because your opponent's going to be prepared for this because it's going to be at the start of any turn. But you're going to use it in a turn where you're expecting a charge from your opponent, or a lot of charges preferably. This is quite potent. Having strike first sort of on demand is pretty cool. And I like that it's also kind of a deterrent for your opponent to charge in, because you're going to think twice about charging into a Hearthguard Berserker's units that's juiced up when you know that they're going to strike you first, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is I think this is more of a deterrent because of how early it triggers. The thing that's um, we can compare this to kind of what they used to do. So this is kind of a combination of two old battle traits. One of which was the actual thing called Rune of Fury, which used to give +1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons. This is just a totally different thing. I think overall, I'd rather be striking first and removing some of their counterattack than just getting +1 to hit, because you could still get +1 to hit from a different source, of course.
Yeah.
And then the other ability it's kind of combining was a once per game ability that all of your Auric Hearthguard Berserkers and Volkite Berserkers, basically your guys that aren't heroes, that those units, if they got charged, same as this, could pop it once per game and have strike first. But now it's all of your units, so your heroes can do it. Basically, you can create whatever kind of line you want, and you're not reliant on those 3 units. So if you want to go heavy hero hammer, you could totally do that, and then they all get strike first on that turn too.
Very juicy.
The question is whether you want to give that up for one of the other ones, of course.
Yeah.
Because the other ones, there's the next one we're going to look at is also defense.
Yeah, it might be interesting to add something here to the discussion. That's kind of a preview, I guess, about what we're going to see later. We're going to see a hero later, the Auric Rune-master, and his ability influences all of these runes in a different way. So I just quickly want to add what it's going to be for all the people that have already read the entire article, but kind of want to look at it as a whole via our review of this. So if you're bringing the Auric Rune-master and you're able to juice up his ability and you're able to pop it, it's going to add 1 to wound rolls on top of the strike first effect if you're using the Rune of Fury.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good place to talk about also what this ability used to be, is that when you declared what rune you wanted in the current book, the 3.0 book, you'd roll a die, and if you procced a 6, then your whole army got an extra effect.
Yeah.
So this guy's we're seeing this with a lot of the battle traits, that some of the battle traits, like with Usharon in Feck, get moved onto a war scroll for a specific unit. Now, this guy it's not guaranteed, and we'll talk about how he triggers it later.
Yeah.
But I think this is a perfect time to talk about it. What it used to do was +1 to attacks. So now it went from +1 to hit and +1 to attacks in melee to strike first, and then, like you said, +1 to wound.
Yeah.
So those are not necessarily comparable, but like it's at least a side grade, if not an upgrade, I think. It depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the Rune of Fiery Determination, which you will pop in any hero phase. Again, once per battle and all that kind of jazz. So friendly Fyreslayer units have a 5+ ward for the rest of the battle. Now, it's important, if you're not a Fyreslayer player like me, you got to keep in mind that they already have a 6-up ward in and of themselves. So it's not like you're adding a 5-up ward, you're just improving their ward to a 5-up instead of a 6-up. Which is still very nice, by the way.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot to unpack there, because even though this is a simple rule on the surface, you say that they all have a 6-up ward, but that's new. So they're kind of like a death army for order, because every war scroll we've seen in this has a 6-up ward base. So this is basically functionally adding +1 ward, if you will, which is doubling the amount of mortal wounds you're warding off. The other thing to mention is that they did used to have a source of a 6+ ward, and that was by standing around the Battlesmith, I believe. Now we've seen his war scroll only in the form of a spearhead in this article, so we don't know if he would still have been giving something like that anyway, or like what he's doing on the spearhead war scroll. But in any case, you used to have to stand around the guy, and now the whole army's basically just got a Battlesmith standing around, which is really great. That said, I will admit that a lot of the units have -1 to their save from what they had in 3rd edition, so it's a little bit of a trade-off. But
Which
of
is more
course,
flavorful because they're not wearing any armor.
exactly.
Yep.
And the ward is meant to be kind of like what those the runes that are in their skin is doing.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what the buff is coming from the what's his name, the Rune-master?
Yeah, so if you're adding the 5-up ward to their profile instead of the 6-up ward, you're also getting +1 to save rolls for friendly Fyreslayer units for the rest of the battle round. So on top of the ward save, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so you're going super defensive.
And the thing is,
Again,
Ryan, this would be awesome if it was for the entire turn, but it's for the entire battle round. It's so good.
Yeah, which is, I mean, the good thing is you can declare it in your if your opponent goes first, then you're getting it for both turns. So that's pretty solid. You just have to have the foresight to know which one's more important, striking first with maybe +1 to, or a 5-up ward with maybe a +1 save.
Yeah. It sounds like a super tough decision, but I can kind of imagine that in a lot of battles you'll just know, because it's gonna be pretty clear that if you're popping a ward save on a unit that really wants to kill, that has the ability to kill something, you're probably better off with the Rune of Fury instead of the Rune of Fiery Determination.
Yeah, also worth mentioning maybe is if your opponent goes first and you're having to decide which one of these you want to pop, you either way you're getting to decide after they've declared their battle tactic, because if it's in their turn, yes, it says start of any turn, but they have to do all of their start of any turn things first.
Yeah.
So that's good. So then you can say, well, which one's going to help me deny that battle tactic better? Could be a way of making that decision.
Yeah, and if you don't expect any action in the first battle round, you don't necessarily have to use any of these abilities. Sure, you're going to be wasting one at the end of the battle, but at least you'll have the 5 options when you get to battle round 2.
Right. I mean, but here's the difference too, is that before you had to make the decision at the start of your hero phase period if you were going to use a rune. But now you can say, well, I can wait till the shooting phase.
Yep.
I can wait till the charge phase. So if you haven't used one, then you could try to use one of the other ones because they happen later in the turn.
Yep.
So
Very
I think it's actually more flexible now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the shooting one, it's a little bit different from the other ones because it doesn't necessarily buff your units. Well, it just doesn't. So when you declare his ability, you can only use one. You can only use it when you haven't used an Hearthguard Rune ability as usual. But then you have to pick any number of enemy units within 10 inches of any visible Fyreslayer units to be the targets. Potentially, that's quite a lot of units. Roll a d3 for each target. On a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. Again, with a 2+ thing here, we still don't necessarily know what that's gonna mean, but usually it will probably mean on a roll of a 3 or a 4 on a d6. So
3+. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean on a 3+, not on just a 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this has things to unpack too, because the army used to be, strangely, one of the only armies in the game that had almost every single unit having a shooting attack. But now they've taken all of those wimpy little axes off their profiles, which is great for speeding things up because they had like a bad profile and had an 8-inch range. But they've kind of worked it into this ability because this ability used to buff the axes, but this I can tell you is way better. Except unless you just really needed weight of dice with a whole bunch of like crappy attacks from the axes. This has got 2 more inches than the axes have. And then you might say, well, could you break this and then like stack it? The thing is, you're only choosing enemy units based off of any amount of enemy units that are within 10 inches of visible Fyreslayers units. It doesn't mean that per Fyreslayer unit you choose, you get to choose an enemy unit. So you can't stack it on different units. And where this is going to be the strongest is of course, if they have a lot of units, so individual MSU type units, and they all happen to be within 10 inches. So if they're staying on the back end of the field, this isn't going to do a whole lot for you until you make your way across the field. But if they have an army that's like just a whole bunch of MSU units that come into you, sure, I could see this picking off, enough units over time. I mean, you could maybe even hit their whole army, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. It's definitely better than what the axes used to do, I think, all in all. But the axes are gone, so it's kind of weighing the pluses and minuses.
Yeah, and the hero that we're gonna see later affects this in a way that it increases the range from 10 inches to 16 inches, which
Yes.
is a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
It's by far the weakest one, at least in my eyes. I don't know where you agree, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an upgrade from what it was
Sure,
before.
sure.
So, in the sense that that used to be even worse before, then yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think it's that bad. But
yeah.
I think it could pick off a target here or there.
Yeah,
So
the thing is, I've played a lot of Soulblight games, and you've got that AOE spell that damages all of their units for 1 damage, and it used to even do 2 damage sometimes on the entire battlefield. Obviously,
yeah,
that's not completely what this does, but it's kind of scary, just to get that mortal wound chip damage on all of your heroes, because then it gets also very easy to kill those units once you get into combat with them.
yeah, yeah. It's
So you
definitely
kind of
handy.
underestimate this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have to see how what the meta looks like on those heroes and how good they are at screening that kind of thing out.
Yeah. Okay, Rune of Relentless Zeal. So once again, once per battle, and you can also only use if you haven't used any Urgold rune abilities. You have to use this in your charge phase though, so there is no other way to use it. For the rest of the battle round, friendly Fyreslayer units can use charge abilities even if they use a run ability in the same turn.
Yeah, so this one got nerfed a bit in a way because it used to be what plus 2 inches to their movement characteristic, which was really nice because you also had a new guy, Grimbold Exile, that could give your whole army run and charge once per game, everything that was within 6 inches of him.
Yeah.
So you could take multiples of those guys maybe and make this keep happening. Um, so the thing is, of course, the ability that gets added here is +1 to run and +1 to charge, which functionally is giving you those 2 inches back. But then you'd have to combine it with the what's he called again? The
Auric
the
Rune-master.
Rune-master. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see
Um,
what went wrong in their rules writing here?
um, hmm. Well, I mean, I am thinking about the possibility of using redeploy with counter charge in the opponent's turn if you pop this off on your turn at the start of the battle round. I think it enables that, but is there something bigger than that that you're thinking about?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a little bit weird to talk about it now because it's so important to see the war scroll that we're talking about here. But the ability, the Auric Rune-master, who basically improves the runes here, has a sentence above his ability, and it says, "Reaction: You declared an Urgold rune ability." So this reaction pops off in your charge phase when you're using the Rune of Relentless Zeal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his buff to your units is add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls for the rest of the battle rounds.
Oh yeah, yeah. I see what you
You
mean.
see it?
Yeah, the run's not going to do anything.
Yeah, or at least not in your turn. It'll happen in your opponent's turn, but then you're not running. So
Well, redeploy is a run move if I'm not mistaken, but in any case, so you're right. It would only be impacting the redeploy if that's correct.
yeah.
Um,
So I think this is like a mix up of times past where they might have planned something different for this ability or how they've written it.
yeah,
But as of right now, you can't really use the buff to the runs. It's only +1 to charge if you use a Rune Master.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But
Maybe they just need to change it to +2 to charge, and then it
yeah,
gets the same
that
effect.
would make more sense because again, +1 to runs is kind of a feel bad if you want to use this in your charge phase. So well, you get the charging after running, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing I was talking about too, if you use redeploy for one countercharge for two, you're blowing 3 CPs to make this happen. But I'm pretty sure this enables you to redeploy into a countercharge. That said, I don't know how useful that is.
Hmm.
So and how necessary that is. So that is what it is.
Well, can you counter charge because it's in your charge phase?
This is declaring, but it's till the end of the battle round.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. And then the last one, let's get onto that one, I guess.
Yeah.
It's melee weapons are getting crit mortal, which is actually pretty good now that we know that crit
Amazing.
mortal means that whatever your damage characteristic is what's going through.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think this is the point that we need to specify that this is an ability, as almost everything is, and that means it's not impacting your companions.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking about your magma droths getting any of this stuff, if it has to do with the attack sequence, it's as rules is written right now as we know them, it's not impacting them. So it's only for the guys on top. It's still good on like a Rune-father on Magmadroth because he's got a good damage profile or damage characteristic. So if he gets a 6, proximity 6s, then he's doing 3 wounds right away, which is good. What's the ability that gets stacked on here? Can you remind us?
Yeah, it improves the rend by 1.
Yeah, which is obviously great because you're getting mortals, and then you're more likely to get closer to your mortals output because you're increasing the rend.
Yeah.
So it gets
so
to the
if you
save
don't
point.
crit, you still have the rend to push your damage through.
Yeah, and that used to, if I'm not Searing Heat. This ability used to do mortals on 6s to wound, and that was in addition. This is not in addition, but 6s to wound is way worse than 6s to hit.
Yeah.
So this is definitely an upgrade. And then the enhanced effect was you could do some mortal wounds to units within 3 inches, just a little bit. I think this is definitely better. It's kind of mixing when you combine that buff. It's kind of combined with the Rune of Awakened Steel, the old version of this rule, whatever that used to do +1 rend, or if you procced, got +2. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds a little bit with these. But ultimately, I feel like these are all really strong. And obviously, this is an ability that you'd like to hit and to go first in the battle round and get 2 turns worth of this. So, which is your favorite of the 5?
Rune of Fury.
Interesting. Why is that your favorite?
I like the psychological warfare of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I love about playing Techless, and what I loved about Total Eclipse when it first came out. I'm kind of sick of it now, but when it first came out, I loved it. It was just like your opponent could still do whatever they wanted, but it always came at a cost, right? And now you're like, okay, so I'll pop my Rune of Fury. Nothing's happened so far. It's up to you, my friend. But if you charge into me, you know you're probably gonna die first before I do, right? So I love that psychological aspect of it. You know that you're kind of mind gaming your opponent here a little bit by telling them like, come at me, but you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
But it's obviously the strongest one I think is Rune of Searing Heat, because that's such a clear time. There's such a clear timing on that when you want to use it, and it's easy. You don't have to predict anything. It's like, okay, I got my units into combat now. Let's go. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm thinking about like how priority is going to be such an important part of this, and it seems like because one of the problems of Fyreslayers, just it's almost a battle trait in and of itself, is that they move 4 inches unless they're on a Magmadroth. They're slow. And so, in a certain sense, the Rune of Relentless Zeal is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be able to guarantee you actually get your guys over there. Now, the ability you were just talking about, the Strike First one, is great if you have a feeling that the opponent's coming to you. But there's going to be some matchups where they're just going to be shooting at you the whole time. And they're not going to be trying to get to you. So the charge one, I think, is ultimately the most important for delivering your output.
Fair.
In terms of just pure protection and not the psychological deterrent, obviously the 5-up ward maybe with a +1 save is super important. I actually think the combat phase one might be, in some sense, especially if you're not getting the +1 rend, a little bit too high risk, high reward, because it's still hoping for 6s. Exactly.
Yeah,
there's
fair.
nothing guaranteed on that. That said, you thinking about the timing of things, especially if you know you can afford to give up a battle tactic by taking a double, I could see maybe wanting to do once per battle your charge phase if you take the bottom of the round, so the back half of the turn, the battle round, then you get the run and charge, you get in, and then in the next round you pop the combat phase from you take the double and you get it for both turns.
Yeah.
And that might be a way to do that. Or similarly, just make sure that you're going to stick around and pop the once per battle defensive one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about 10 Hearthguard Berserkers, Ryan, with a wounded hero nearby are gonna have 3 attacks each, so that's 31 attacks.
Yeah.
So you're gonna realistically, well, not realistically, statistically, you're gonna roll 5 sixes. They have 2 damage on their weapons, so that's just 10 mortal wounds.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly good. It's just a matter of can you get that unit in? If you can't get that unit
fair
in,
enough.
it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Completely agree.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's been the number one thing holding fire, in my opinion, holding fire for a while.
Yeah,
Is
they just really need their monstrous cavalry.
or they need a way to get sped up. And with run and charge, that is great. And then there's a question: do they still have the deep strikey stuff? I'm assuming they do to some degree, but
I hope
we'll have
so
to
for
see.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at some. Oh no, sorry. I was gonna say let's look up some war scrolls, but we're gonna look at some battle formations first.
Sure. So we've got this. This one's basically what used to be the one for Volkite Berserkers. I'm trying to remember what the name is. Volstarg. It's adding +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by all friendly Fyreslayers infantry that charged in the same turn. This used to be, if you want to compare it to Volstarg, was a similar thing. It was +1 to hit and wound, but was only for the Volkite Berserkers that made a charge. And now it's all of your infantry, which is all of your heroes, any other units, just not the Magma Dross.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good enough trade? Would you rather have +1 to hit and wound only your basic infantry guys, or do you like this better where it's more flexibly hitting everyone?
Well, I think I prefer the previous one because damage is usually not coming from small foot heroes anyway.
Well, this is an exception army, I would say. Like there's a version of this where you run just a whole bunch of the non-leader heroes that we used to have, like what's he called, the Grimwrath Berserker and the Doomseeker. I could see I mean, that is a popular like meta
That's
list.
true, yeah, and they were quite potent before as well, so they might still be.
Yeah, I mean, they're still getting buffed by that. And this is one of the better hero hammer if you want to run that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I mean, it's just not going to apply to the Magma Dross, but the real question for me comes down to whether the Volkite Berserkers were actually that good. And I don't remember anyone taking this unit, taking this sub faction all that much, because that was just kind of your basic battle line unit before. But I mean, I don't know. It depends on what that war scroll looks like right now.
Yeah,
they're not going to be better than the Hearthguard Berserkers though, and we do see those in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at some scrolls.
Yeah, sure. Well, we've got.
Damn it!
Yeah, you keep jumping the gun here.
Jumping the axe.
So yeah, so this prayer is unlimited now. It used to go off on a 4, and it had a longer range. I think it was 18 inches, so it lost 6 inches. But of course, it can get overpowered. Its basic ability is -1 to wound for bubble. No, you pick a friend. It's not a bubble. You're picking a unit, and then if you do 8+, you overcharge it or whatever. Then it is also -1 to rend. So what do you think about this? I mean, this is kind of similar to the Gits one, where you're creating instead of a bubble, you're giving it to specific units, but it's unlimited. Do you see yourself using this?
I mean, yes, it's fine. It costs 4 points, which well, it'll depend on how easy it is to charge up these points. The thing why the Gits one kind of attracts me more is because realistically, you don't need any reserves to get to that point to cast it on a lot of your units, right? You can just keep rolling your cast, and if there's maybe any casting bonuses in your army, you're more reliably getting those off. So far, we haven't really seen that many ways to improve your prayers. So I don't know how realistic it is to expect to use this more than once. That must mean that all of your other prayers and invocations are total shit, right? If you're constantly putting these on your units.
I mean, I don't know. The unlimited prayers and spells are supposed to be ones that are generally very useful. but maybe aren't um, like one-off overpowered. There's a reason they get to be unlimited.
Yeah, yeah.
We have seen, however, the War Scroll for the terrain piece, the Magmic Battle Forge, it just wasn't in this article. And just as a reminder, there was an ability that at the start of any turn, you can pick a friendly Fyreslayer's priest within its combat range, and then add 1 to chanting rolls. In addition, he can unbind as if you had Wizard 1. And that's the start of any turn. Now, I don't know if that's stackable because I just don't know what the core rules say. It doesn't say once per turn.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's once, but there's a version of reality where I could see that it just could pick any number of them. I don't know if you can trigger if someone can do its ability multiple times in one turn, but let's assume it's just one. Then you are getting +1 to chant. So it's like rolling a 3 up then in that case. And we haven't seen all the priests, so we don't know if they can stack all that stuff. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, subtracting 1 from moon roll is always good, so.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to a War Scroll since you're biting at the chomping
Damn
at the
it,
bit.
now I couldn't even say it right.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the Auric Rune-father. He's on the Magmadroth, so it's cool that we're getting to see that, right? Now, this guy's, it might look like his wounds situation got worse because he lost 2 points of health, but he gained a 6-up ward. And then when you do the math on this, if I did it right, he actually comes out just a tad bit better against any amount of rend. If I did the computations right here. In any case, it's not much worse, even if it's off. So, him getting a ward goes a long way to staying alive. But like you said, everyone in this army seems to have gotten a ward. So that's definitely something. Honestly, the War Scroll stayed very similar in function to what he used to do. I mean, he's got a shooting attack that got a little bit further. I did the math on this. I believe it was it used to be based, the number of attacks it had was based off of how many models were in the unit that it targeted. And he could also make it have better rend if he I want to say because I'm using the verb, it's foregone. He foregoes. Yeah. So anyway, if you chose in a previous turn not to use this ability, then he went from rend -1 to rend -3. So I think, but the profile got a little bit better in stats. So it ends up working out that if the unit had 7 or more models in it, then it was better the way it used to be. Not taking into account the rend because that's hard to equate because you're basically giving up your shooting attacks. And now if it's 6 or less models, it comes out better. Problem is, it doesn't have shooting in combat, which is weird because it's a fire stream, and most of the attacks we've seen from monsters that are kind of breath weapons thus far have been shooting and have the shooting combat ability. So now there's going to be some turns where you don't even get to do it, and this guy wants to be in combat. So I don't know how to feel about that. I kind of feel like overall it got nerfed a little bit. Do you have any strong opinions about that? Like that it's not shooting combat or anything?
I think it might actually have been because it didn't fit on the ability page anymore.
Jonas?
Sorry,
you broke up there. I don't know if
okay. I think it might have actually been because it just didn't fit on the ability roster anymore.
Yeah. Well,
I think they maybe went like, do we want the anti-infantry here or do we want the shooting combat? I don't know. I
mean, if the guy's living his best life, though, he's never going to use it. He'll use it like and especially if he has run and charge. That turn he's not getting to run and shoot. So anyway, and then the rest of the damage output is mostly the same. They kind of did what they did with a lot of monsters, -1, +1 to wound. That's kind of a very common monster profile at this point. And then it getting bracketed, it's not really all that big. Let's look at his abilities, though. So once per turn army, he's got a roar, basically. Then instead of turning off command ability use, he's subtracting 1 from save rolls, which is really strong because remember, that's impacting all of the guys that are in combat with this guy. So then maybe they have to blow a CP on an all-out defense in that combat just to get back to their normal save. And then you still can't use all-out defense anywhere else. So it's almost like it's roaring everyone.
No, it's roaring. It's picking one target, right?
Yeah. But what I mean is you can't use all-out defense twice. So It's not turning
Oh
off
yeah, in
all
that. Yeah,
defense.
yeah. Okay, I get that. Yeah. Nice.
So
Yep.
if they have to use it, then no one else can use it,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting. I think that's a really strong kind of a rampage.
Yep.
Um, he's still, if we look at the upper right hand ability, Warrior Kings, this is the same thing he always had. I'm hoping the on foot version doesn't have this ability, because it used to be that only one of them got to do it, but they both had the same ability. For the rest of the turn, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons by friendly Fyreslayers units wholly within 12. Really good. Keep in mind, it's not going to impact the companion abilities.
Yeah.
So it's only for the guys on top if you do whoops all magma droths, but it's still a really good ability. It did, unfortunately, in that sense, end up nerfing the whoops all magma droths list.
Mm-hmm.
Really good for, like you said, for the Hearthguard Berserkers, though, because now you can give them +2 attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So really strong. And then Volcanic Blood. This got changed. This used to be a kind of splashback mortal wounds, in the sense that if he took a wound on a 4-up, it splashed back. So he had previously 16 wounds characteristic. So that meant on average, he was on his way to dying, he was doing 8 mortal wounds back. But now it's been changed to, if you make an unmodified save roll of 1 for a combat attack that targets he does 1 mortal damage back. Now, what this means, of course, is that if he's got a tough enough save, like let's say he's got that 5-up ward up, and then you all out defense him, so he's on a 3-up save, they have to weight of dice him, and then they're throwing a whole bunch of dice. He gets to make save rolls for all of those, and it's a 1 out of 6 instead of 1 out of 2 like it used to be. But there's a better chance that he's going to shrug a lot of that stuff off eventually and still throw those mortal wounds back. So in a certain sense, I think it got buffed, so long as the unit that's targeting him doesn't have a crazy amount of rend or mortal wounds or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. He used to have like a tail attack that would do D3 mortal wounds, and otherwise his profile hasn't changed a lot, except if you scroll down below, he has the Warmaster keyword,
Yep.
which is notable because it's the only non-unique Warmaster we've seen thus far, and because they've broken that rule now, evidently some armies it could be that every single army has a Warmaster, even if they don't have any unique guys. So, kind of cool.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That's the first time we've seen it. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this type of unit?
I mean, he still looks very good. I like his profile overall. I think it's a very decent unit, and I love his rampage. It's very strong.
Yeah, a lot of people used to combine him with command traits and artifacts to make him go ham. We don't know what those are going to be, and if that's still going to be a build. But I am personally hoping the whoops all Magmadross list still makes sense. But considering the companions rule, I'm starting to worry about it a bit. But
yeah.
Anyway, okay. Maybe let's move on to the Rune-master. We've already basically covered this guy.
Yeah.
He's now, one thing we haven't covered is that he's our first non Ionis priest with level 2.
Yep.
Pretty cool. Now, so let's just cover the ability, because his stats wheel, he got a little worse at saving, and he got a. But the ability is every time that he chants a prayer that's answered, he gets a magmic power token. And then the ability that we were talking about buffing each of your rune uses is that he has to remove 3. So until you get up to 3, you're not going to be able to do this. Worth pointing out, unlike a lot of abilities that build up tokens, it doesn't say anything about a max. So hypothetically, you could just keep saving them for the right moment if you really wanted.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about when you're actually going to get 3, because this isn't saying you have some like collection of magmic power tokens that are shared by all rune masters. It's literally per model. So he can only do 2 per your own turn, and then you could do a magical intervention to let him get 1 more off in the opponent's turn. So the earliest you could possibly get this off would be and maybe want to use it on your turn, would be your opponent goes first, you do a magical intervention, you get 1 prayer off, set up a -1 to wound or bubble or whatever, or not bubble, but to 1 unit, something like that. And then you get both of them off in your turn. Problem is, even if he's standing next to the forge, he's only getting +1 to pray, and then you're sitting on 3-ups. You have to get 3 3-ups in a row, assuming that the chanting value is still a 4 for everything. That's not by any means guaranteed. There's a really good chance that you're not going to get this off on turn 1. there's even a chance you're not going to get it off by turn 2.
Yeah.
Especially if you're hoarding your CP so that you don't do magical intervention.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? Like, now that idea that you were saving up to use this stuff, like, I think a lot of people might be thinking, oh, I can make this happen turn. The chance is real slim, even if you double up on these guys and have 2 of them in your army. The chance is real slim that at least 1 out of 2 of them is going to get up to 3, right?
Yeah, I don't rate this guy as highly, actually. I don't like this kind of these kind of abilities where you have to pay for a unit and you're not actually sure whether you're gonna be able to use him when you want to use him. And obviously, it's nice that you still have a priest that has 2 power levels, so you still have that. But the entire point of his existence here is the Master of the Runes ability, and it feels like you might not even have it ready on the turn that you really want it or need it, and that just feels a little bit bad.
Yeah, I mean, if you have multiple guys cooking, then you've got more chances someone's going to get up there. And then let's say they don't both get to 3 on the turn you need, they're probably going to be ready for turns 3 and 4. Both of them will have enough stored up. So I think for a 3 and 4, maybe turn 5, if you had 2 of these guys, you're pretty likely to get 2 out of 3 of those turns off. And then also keep in mind that this says that the prayer has to be answered. And if I understand how prayers work, if you say you needed a 4 and you rolled a 3, then you get 3 prayer ritual points or whatever. That doesn't count as a prayer being answered because you didn't give it out, like, to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so you collected the chanting points, which is the ritual points, which is great, but that doesn't count as one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So and also keep in mind, because you're probably trying to get as many of these prayers off, you're not going to have time to save up all those ritual points to get like the expanded version of a spell or a prayer.
Yeah.
Because I would choose almost every time to have the empowered version of a rune instead of getting the empowered version of a prayer.
Yeah.
You know,
actually, Ryan, when you mentioned that that you could double up on these guys, is there anything that we know so far that prohibits us from using this reaction twice on the same rune ability?
It does say under the text that they don't stack. Like in the copy from what the article
yeah.
They write, just keep in mind that this ability can't happen.
Oh yeah, so. Yeah. Okay, I can see. I see that now. Okay, that would have changed my mind a little bit.
Yeah, but adding +2 to rend to something would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, it would be disgusting. But then it would also require a lot to set up, right? And depending on how expensive these guys are, it will also require quite a vast points investment.
Yeah, and I mean, they're pretty easy to shoot off too. So you're going to want to put a unit around, giving them a bit increased ward.
Yeah,
like what we're going to see with the Hearthguard. Yeah. Or do they give the ward to the? Yeah, they do give the ward to. Yeah. So let's scroll down to them. Hearthguard Berserkers have been kind of like the bread and butter, like hard hitting unit for Fyreslayers, because the shooting version of this kit just hasn't been pulling its weight for a really long time. And then Volkites were just like cheaper bodies to get. They were decent output actually, but they're just not Hearthguard Berserkers level. They used to have 2 different weapons, and they kind of condensed them in a certain sense. But they're basically got the non-mortal wounds one now. And the other one used to do mortal wounds in addition.
Well, there might still be another one, Ryan, because it says in the top here, Hearthguard Berserkers with Berserker broadaxes.
Oh, good catch. Good catch. So maybe they've got 2 units that are 2 different Volkite builds and 2 different Hearthguard Berserker builds.
I can only imagine that's going to be the case because Fyreslayers already have so little units. Pun intended.
Yes. I mean, they look basically the same, which is to me the core problem.
Yeah.
But that's great that you caught that. I totally glanced over that. Awesome. So let's assume there is a second unit. So hopefully they have totally different roles. This one's giving out, maybe they'll both give out the ward. So that's the building green there.
Yeah.
Giving out, as long as there's an infantry hero that's wholly within 3 inches, basically, this unit and that unit get a 5-up ward, which is basically what we saw with the Crypt Guard in Feck.
Yeah.
So this got nerfed though, because it used to be much more generous. It was like a 9-inch bubble, and didn't have to be an infantry hero, and was a 4-up ward. So this unit is, and they lost 1 point of save if I'm not mistaken. So they got their durability, which is kind of like what they made them so good also before, just got shot in the foot. But maybe that means that they're going to be cheaper, so that you can focus on what their output is doing. It's quite a bit of output, especially if you get all
It
those other
is.
buffs off.
Yeah.
Um, and like you said, one of the Fyreslayers heroes has to be wounded. Um, the problem is, are you going to be able to guarantee that one of your heroes is wounded unless you send them in? Now, the
Mm-hmm.
good news is some of those heroes like to fight on death, if at least if they keep their old wording. Like I think like the Doom Seeker or
Yeah.
one of those guys liked to do that.
Yeah.
So if that's a thing and you help send them in and they get buffed when they're fighting or whatever, then it's less risk reward there. Um, and you might also be thinking, oh well, what if I took a priest and then he rolls a 1 on a chant and then takes some mortal wounds or mortal damage? That's not a thing anymore. If they roll 1, they lose ritual points and they don't take damage. So there's no way to, I think, as far as I'm aware, trigger it, just so that you can guarantee that it happens, other than just sending your dude in and hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about this war scroll?
Yeah, if you don't look at their wheel, it's amazing. Especially if you think about the Rune-father that allows them to get an extra attack, so they might potentially have 4 attacks even, and then that on top of the rune that might allow them to crit for mortals.
Yeah,
Very scary unit, but then 6-up save,
yeah.
4 inches.
And 6-up ward, as we all know, is
Yeah,
not enough to
no.
keep these guys alive.
So this looks like a war scroll where you're really gonna need the teleport and then have a lot of luck on your charges.
Yeah, I mean, at least they've got a 3-inch range, so you know that if you keep them alive, they're going to be able to,
Yeah.
all get to fight probably, because the biggest size unit you could take of these guys is 10, so they should all be able to get in there. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm still up on it. I'm curious to see how they develop the other version of these guys
Yeah.
with also the Volkites and the shooting unit. Hopefully, they make the shooting unit interesting.
Yeah,
The Auric.
that's usually the thing that they do, right? A unit that's kind of mediocre or not seen on the table much, they kind of give that unit some time in the sun.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, let's take a look at the Molten Inferno. When I first saw this, um, considering they is the first time they've shown us one in a while, where invocation and show us how they summon it. I was
Mm-hmm.
hoping that they just decided to make it not an invocation anymore, and it was a monster you could bring to the list,
I
which
thought the
would have
same
been.
thing. I was
Did
thinking the
you
same
really?
thing. Like that would make so much sense because this army has so little, so few war scrolls.
Yeah, it would be so cool because it's a cool model.
Yeah.
And they also talked about one of the formations being something that summons like barricades,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought maybe that would be a different way to use the kit, like the endless spells kit. But alas, it's still a invocation. Um, so I mean, this profile you can see 10 health, 5-up save, 6+ ward, banish value of 7+, which seems to be the average right now.
Yeah.
It's got a shooting attack and a melee attack, both of which can do some work. Um, and then its main ability is that if you can, at the end of any turn, you pick an enemy unit that had any damage allocated to it by either one of those 2 attacks. And then that unit gets -1 to wound until the end of your next turn, which is interesting. So that
Mm-hmm.
basically means you're still getting it, even if you take a double or whatever. You're still getting to get a whole turn's worth of -1 to wound, which is nice. The thing is, this thing's a lot easier to get rid of than it once was. It used to do a whole bunch of mortal wounds if it got close to like within 3 inches of units, and then the thing is, yeah, it's got 10 health and a 5+ save, 6+ ward, but so now you can attack it in 2 different ways that way, and you can banish it. But keep in mind, invocations have gotten nerfed in that sense because you used to never be able to get these off the table unless you had a priest.
Yeah.
Like there was no way to interact with them. They just stayed on the table, and you hoped that they would do their extreme ability, which is like in this case, rolling doubles, which would make it do more damage on one attack or one of its pass throughs where it moved near units, but then you'd have to take it off the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen anymore. So it's just this monster that's walking around, which is great, but a lot easier to get rid of. How do you feel about this? Do you feel like it's gotten a buff or a nerf?
I think it's still okay, especially because you're gonna get this guy for free. Um, uh, it would be worrisome if all the invocations were super strong, especially because you're getting them for free. So expect most of the invocations to get kind of nerfed a little bit. I feel this guy is still pretty interesting, but it's so easy to banish him. That's kind of a bummer, because if you look at the rest of his profile, 10 health, 8 inches movement, 5 up save, 6 apart, and then there is his attack profile. His attacks are quite decent in my eyes. So if you tie up a unit with this guy, that's definitely worth it. But then banishment is such an easy thing to do if you have a wizard nearby or a priest.
Yeah, and remember, if I'm not mistaken, when they talked about the difference between moving in the spells and static ones, this one has to be set up outside of 9 and can't move on the turn you set it up, so it has to charge.
Yeah.
So it has to hit a 9-inch charge,
And there's also no
and
shooting in the first turn then.
because of the range, yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's a
that's a
bummer.
little rough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough.
Okay. So if we look real quickly at the Battlesmith's rules, just in Spearhead, he's also got a War to 6+, which is nice, even in Spearhead. I want to point your attention to his control score,
Yep.
which is, I don't know if that's a typo or if he just has, because I was looking for it somewhere in the text that they wrote around this, but I didn't see anything that seemed to indicate that to confirm, hey, don't freak out, that is actually his control score. But that's a great control score for a hero if that's ends up being what he actually has in the game. He used to have this ability where he'd kind of put the flag down and he kind of made all the friendly units around him more resolute by giving them a 5 up ward instead of a 6. Now he's got the same thing. And so he's just another source of giving a 5+ ward. But I would keep in mind, I'd hesitate to say this might just be a spearhead ability because we have other ways of getting a 5 up ward in the army. But in any case, his other ability, his passive ability giving +1 to save, if he does that, I think that makes him very good.
Yeah.
Just because the army's saves all got nerfed except for a couple models.
Yeah, you
maybe.
need that.
Yeah, so you can't make your save characters get any better, but any all-out defenses or anything you do after that are just ignoring rend. So it's still really solid, and having your whole army protected by maybe 2 of these guys walking around doing a 2 bubbles of wholly within 12 inches +1 to save is nothing to sneeze at. So
yeah, I actually think if it's okay that we talk about the control score again.
Sure.
I actually think that might have been a battle formation they're squeezing into this spearhead box, because if you're looking at the battle formation that we got to see below that, it says one of the other battle formations allows your units to capture objectives more easily or something. Let me quickly scroll back up here. Yeah, enhance the objective capturing prowess of your heroes.
Oh.
I really expect them to just change that, that they all count as 5, and maybe even the magma drops count as even more. Because it makes sense, as you said, this army is very hero hammery still. It makes sense in that case that you need something to hold objectives.
Well, you've sold me. I hope you're right, because I would love to play a hero.
Yeah, just imagine like 10 tiny dwarves and some magma drops, all heroes, and like, woohoo! Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, so maybe, like you're saying, in the lore, this guy's just from that sub-faction or that formation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'd be down for that. I think that's probably more likely than not. And keep in mind, we've seen an example of this already with the Gits, when like the Moon Clan heroes that aren't squigs or under the light of the bad moon, they're also getting +3 to their control score, so they're going up to 5.
Yeah, and keep in mind they really want to balance out these spearhead boxes. They've played this as spearhead a bunch, so I can really imagine if they feel like a box is kind of underpowered, maybe this one was, that they're looking at ways to improve it. And the obvious thing that you're going to look at first is what have you already written? And I can really see them going like, what if we just give him the objective capturing prowess of that said battle formation?
Yeah. No, I think you might be right. Yeah, I think you're onto something here.
We'll see, guys, but that would be very juicy, right?
Yeah. Definitely. What are you? What's your kind of overall opinion? Fyreslayers?
It's such a difficult army to gauge their prowess of, because I love the Urgold rune system much more than it was than the previous one. This is
Yeah.
so clear. It's cool. It's interactive. You get to do it on different occasions or different timings, so at least you're not wasting one completely. The war scrolls still look very good, but I just hate playing an army with 4 inches movement in general.
Yeah, and
It's
run and charge is not solving that entirely.
exactly. We've just not seen enough movement shenanigan stuff to tell me that there's a competitive place for these guys.
Yeah, what if one of the heroes said you can, when you use auto run, you can give it to 3 different units? Would that be enough to sell you?
Yeah, although obviously I haven't played Fyreslayers at all, but I can imagine that Fyreslayers is an army where you really want to get one specific unit with full health into your opponent's army rather than 3 wounded units. So maybe I would actually prefer a ability that kind of launches 1 unit rather than boosting 3 units in a smaller way.
Yeah.
But that might just be me. I mean, you play you've played Fyreslayers, right?
I have them. I've never actually put them on the table because I just wasn't convinced, but I've played against them for sure.
Okay.
Um,
What are you
um,
thinking?
I still stand by that. I think the army needs a little bit more a few more tools in its toolbox to make it flexible enough to really stand up to the meta. It's had its moments,
Yeah.
but if there's a shooting meta, I think this army just gets shot off the field before it gets to you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a melee meta, then I think it's got a chance. But
Yeah.
again, like we saw with the saves, a 6+ save and then even a 5+ ward thereafter, or say you got a +1 save on a 5+ on the Hearthguard Berserkers, is not necessarily a tanky army.
Yeah.
Them used to being on a 5+, 4+ was something.
The thing
So
is, if one of their battle formations, the one that throws up barricades, is something that reduces visibility, that might be a thing where you're playing the anti-ranged game by throwing up all these barricades to block your advance.
yeah.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Hard to say. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think most of these factions we're still too in the dark to really say. But I like this. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's cool. Do you want to take us out?
sure. All right, guys. Thanks for keeping up with all these faction focuses. Tomorrow is Ideneth, but I can tell you right now, I don't think we're going to get that video out tomorrow. But hopefully, we're picking right back up on Wednesday. We'll have to see what other armies we got this week. Really looking forward to just more of these reveals. Let's fingers crossed for some of Jonas's armies soon. And guys, thanks so much. Hit us up in the Discord. Like, share, and subscribe down below. Really helps keep the channel buzzing. All right. Until next time, Ryan and Jonas out.